Lily had always been overwhelmed by the chaos of the city. The constant rush, the never-ending noise, the people always in a hurry, everything about city life had become suffocating. It wasn't just the crowd, it was the weight of expectations, the relentless pursuit of something she wasn't even sure she wanted. So, after years of working in the corporate world, drowning in deadlines and meetings, Lily made the decision to leave it all behind. She packed up her life and moved to a small coastal town, far away from the hustle and bustle, seeking something she could no longer name. The little town she chose was picturesque, almost like something out of a dream, a quiet, quaint village with winding roads, old houses, and a view of the endless ocean. Lily had rented a small wooden house near the beach, where the sound of the waves crashing against the shore was the only noise she needed. Every morning, she woke up to the fresh scent of sea air and the soft glow of the rising sun. It was peaceful, and for the first time in years, she felt a sense of calm she hadn't even known she was missing. She quickly found a job at the town's small bookstore. It wasn't a busy place, but that suited Lily just fine. The store was owned by an elderly man named Arthur, who had a warm smile and a soft voice. He told her he had been running the store for decades, and that it was more of a sanctuary than a business. It was exactly what Lily needed, a place where time seemed to slow down, and the only demand was a quiet companionship with books. Lily's days were spent organizing the bookshelves, reading in the quiet corners of the store, and meeting the rare local who wandered in for a book or two. The bookstore was small, tucked away on a quiet street, but it had a kind of magic to it. The smell of old paper, the soft lighting, the creaky wooden floors, all of it made Lily feel like she was part of something timeless. And while she hadn't expected to form close connections in this small town, she would soon find that the bookstore would lead her to something, or rather someone, entirely unexpected. Her name was Isla. Isla first came into the bookstore on a rainy afternoon. Lily had been shelving books, absorbed in the soft patter of raindrops on the windows, when she heard the door open. She looked up, and there stood Isla, a woman with dark, wild hair and eyes that seemed to hold secrets. She looked almost out of place in the small shop, as if she had stepped out of another time. Her clothes were simple, yet there was something about her, something untold, that made her stand out. "Hello?" Isla said, her voice quiet but steady as she stepped further inside. "I'm looking for something specific." Lily smiled, still a little surprised by the sudden presence of the mysterious woman. "Sure, what are you looking for?" "Poetry," Isla replied simply, her eyes scanning the shelves. "Something that speaks to the soul." Lily nodded, guiding her to the poetry section. They didn't talk much at first. There was a certain quietness to Isla that Lily couldn't quite place. She watched as Isla carefully ran her fingers over the spines of the books, each one seemingly speaking to her in a way Lily couldn't understand. Isla picked up a thin volume of poems by Rainer Maria Rilke and started flipping through it, her expression softening with every page she turned. "Do you like poetry?" Isla asked suddenly, her voice breaking the silence between them. Lily hesitated for a moment, not sure what to say. Poetry had never been her first choice, but there was something in Isla's presence that made her want to be honest. "I've never really read much poetry," she admitted, "but I've always wanted to." Isla smiled, her lips curving slightly. "There's a certain magic to it," she said. "Poetry has a way of making you see the world differently." Something in Isla's words resonated with Lily. They didn't talk much more that day, but from that moment on, Isla became a regular visitor to the bookstore. She would come in most afternoons, often sitting in the same corner, lost in a book. And soon, Lily found herself drawn to her. Not just because of her love for poetry, but because of the quiet strength Isla carried with her. It was as if she had a piece of the world's wisdom tucked behind her eyes, something Lily couldn't quite understand but longed to. Over the next few weeks, their conversations grew longer, deeper. They spoke about the books they loved, about the nature of the world, and sometimes about things neither of them could quite put into words. Isla would read poems to Lily, her voice gentle and melodic. And with each poem, Lily felt something stirring within her, something she didn't know how to name. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Isla read a poem she had written herself, one that she had never shared with anyone. It was about the sea, about the way the tides pulled at the shore, and how, despite all of the pushing and pulling, everything remained in balance. It spoke of longing, of searching for something just beyond reach. Isla read the poem softly, and Lily felt a tightness in her chest, a sense of recognition she couldn't ignore. "I've always felt like I was meant to be somewhere else," Isla said after reading the last line. "Like I'm always searching for something I can't quite name." Lily looked at her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't explain it, but she felt it too. It was as if the universe had brought them together in this small bookstore by the sea for a reason. As the days turned into weeks, Lily began to notice something shifting between them. The connection she had with Isla was growing deeper, more intense. It wasn't just friendship anymore. Lily couldn't ignore the way her heart fluttered when Isla smiled, or the way her thoughts wandered to Isla when they weren't together. And the more they spoke, the more Lily realized she was falling for her. But this wasn't something Lily was prepared for. She had never thought about being with another woman. She had spent her life chasing the idea of love, but it had always felt like a distant dream, something that was never quite within her grasp. And now, here she was, experiencing something entirely unexpected with Isla. It made her question everything she thought she knew about herself, about her identity, and about love. One evening, after the bookstore had closed and the town was quiet, Lily found herself walking with Isla along the beach. The moonlight shimmered over the waves, casting a soft glow on the sand. They walked in silence for a while, both lost in their thoughts. Finally, Isla stopped, turning to face Lily. "Do you ever wonder if we're meant to be something more than just friends?" Isla's voice was soft but filled with something that made Lily's heart race. Lily's breath caught in her throat. "I do," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm scared. Scared of what? Of what it means, of what people will think," Lily admitted, her eyes searching Isla's face for answers. "Of what it means for me, for us." Isla stepped closer, her presence warm and steady. "Love isn't something to be afraid of," she said, her hand gently brushing against Lily's. "Sometimes the hardest thing is learning to accept it. But I promise it's worth it." Lily felt a warmth spread through her chest. In that moment, she knew. She knew that what she felt for Isla was real, and that no matter the fears or the doubts that clung to her, she couldn't deny it any longer. As they stood together on the shore, the waves crashing at their feet, Lily knew that this was only the beginning. The road ahead might be difficult, the world may not always understand, but with Isla by her side, she felt ready to face whatever came next. In the quiet whispers of the tides, Lily had found herself, and perhaps, in Isla, she had found the love she had always been searching for. As the days passed in the small coastal town, Lily felt herself at a crossroads. On the surface, everything seemed calm and simple. The bookstore, the quiet walks on the beach, and her conversations with Isla had brought a peace to her soul that she hadn't known in years. But underneath it all, a storm was brewing, a swirl of emotions and thoughts that she couldn't silence, no matter how hard she tried. Lily had always thought of herself as someone who was figuring it out. She had worked hard in the city, built a life she could be proud of. Even if it felt empty at times, she had done everything the way she was supposed to. School, career, relationships. She'd had boyfriends in the past, flirted with the idea of settling down, and even convinced herself that she was happy. But none of it had ever felt right. There had always been something missing, like an invisible thread pulling her in a direction she couldn't quite make out. And now, standing in the middle of this small town with the sound of the waves crashing against the shore, Lily began to question everything she had ever known about herself. The connection with Isla was undeniable. From the first moment they'd met, there was something magnetic about her. Isla was so different from the people Lily had known in the city. Quiet, mysterious, with a love for poetry and a depth to her that Lily couldn't quite comprehend. But it was more than that. It was the way Isla made her feel. The way she could look at Lily with those dark, soulful eyes and make her heart race without saying a word. It was the way their hands brushed against each other in the quiet moments, the way the air between them seemed to hum with something unspoken. Lily had tried to ignore it at first. She told herself that it was just the isolation of the small town, the lack of distractions that made her overthink. She told herself that Isla was simply a friend, a quiet soul she could talk to about books and life. But the more they spoke, the more their conversations grew, the more Lily found herself thinking about Isla, thinking about her in ways that were far more intimate than she had ever expected. One evening, while they were sitting on a bench overlooking the ocean, Isla had asked her that question that hung in the air between them for so long. "Do you ever wonder if we're meant to be something more than just friends?" Lily had frozen, her heart hammering in her chest. She knew exactly what Isla was asking, but the answer, the truth, was something Lily was terrified to face. Was she meant to be with Isla? Was this love? Lily had always prided herself on being clear-headed, rational. She wasn't the type to be swept up in emotions or fantasies. But now, with Isla so close, her heart felt like it was being torn in two directions. On one side, there was Isla. The woman who had opened something inside Lily she hadn't known was there. On the other side, there was the world Lily had known, the life she thought she was supposed to live. The one where she was supposed to have a family, a house with a white picket fence, maybe a husband who would love her in the right way. The world where being with a woman wasn't something that made sense. In those moments when Isla looked at her with such raw emotion, Lily's thoughts would spiral. What if she was wrong? What if the life she had envisioned for herself was just a cage? But the fear was real. It gripped her heart every time she thought about the people she knew back in the city, the ones who would never understand. She couldn't even imagine telling her friends about Isla. Would they think she was confused? Would they think she was just experimenting? And then there was the town, the small, sleepy coastal village that, on the surface, seemed so peaceful. But beneath that surface, Lily could feel the weight of unspoken rules, of traditions that had been passed down through generations. The people here were friendly, but their acceptance wasn't always unconditional. The town had its own set of values, its own way of thinking, and the thought of standing out, of being different, terrified Lily more than she cared to admit. What would they say if they found out? As she walked through the quiet streets, her footsteps echoing in the silence of the evening, the weight of her internal battle pressed heavily on her chest. There were days when she could push it all aside, when she could sit with Isla, talk about poetry, feel the gentle brush of her fingers against her own, and lose herself in the magic of it all. But other days, most days now, Lily couldn't escape the feeling of being pulled in opposite directions. There were moments when she would lie awake in her bed, the moonlight casting shadows across her room, and she would ask herself, "Who am I?" Not the Lily who had followed a set path, who had built a life by the book, but the woman who was sitting on a bench by the sea, her heart fluttering for someone she never expected. The woman who didn't know how to answer when asked about her own desires. Her confusion deepened when she tried to look at her past relationships. Every boyfriend she'd had seemed like a fleeting attempt to fill a space that was never quite right. She'd tried to make herself like them, tried to convince herself that there was something there. But now, looking back, it felt more like an obligation. She had played the role that was expected of her, but it never felt real. It was only when she was with Isla, when she felt the softness of her voice, the warmth of her touch, that she realized what love could really be. It wasn't a performance or a checklist. It wasn't about meeting expectations or living up to someone else's idea of happiness. It was about feeling seen, about feeling understood in a way that Lily had never experienced before. One night, after another long day of sorting through books and stacking shelves, Lily found herself walking back to her house with Isla beside her. The air was thick with the scent of salt water, and the sky was a blanket of stars. They walked in silence for a while, and then Isla stopped. "I know you're scared," Isla said quietly, her voice soft but certain. "You don't have to have it all figured out, but I want you to know I'm here. If you need me." Lily's heart broke at the tenderness in Isla's words. She wanted to say something, wanted to reach out and make this feeling of rightness known, but the words were tangled in her throat. "I want you, Isla," she thought, but the fear of what that might mean kept her silent. "I'm not scared of you," Lily finally whispered. "I'm scared of me." Isla's gaze softened. She stepped closer and Lily could feel the heat radiating from her. "Don't be," Isla whispered. "You're exactly who you need to be. You just need to believe it." Lily closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her emotions. She wanted to believe Isla, wanted to believe in herself, but the road ahead was uncertain. Could she truly embrace this new part of herself, or would she continue to fight it? Could she live a life where she was true to herself, even if it meant stepping away from everything she had once thought was hers? The ocean whispered in the distance, as if urging her to listen to the pull of the tides, to follow where they led. And for the first time, Lily felt like she could. She could take the first step into the unknown, guided by the quiet strength of the woman beside her, and trust that whatever happened next, it would be her truth. The quiet town, with its gentle rhythms and winding streets, had always been a place where everyone knew everyone else. It was easy to blend in if you played by the unspoken rules, easy to be accepted if you fit the mold. Lily had quickly noticed that the town wasn't necessarily unfriendly, but it had its own set of expectations. People were polite, but there was a certain level of conformity that ran deep. She had never fully felt like she belonged. She had always been the outsider in every place she'd lived, but here, the feeling was sharper. In a town where everyone's business was everyone's business, there was little room for deviation from the norm. Her connection with Isla had grown in secrecy. Their meetings, their late-night walks, the quiet moments in the bookstore, all felt like their little world, a bubble of understanding that no one else was privy to. But there was always the undercurrent of fear, the fear of what would happen if anyone else knew. Would they judge? Would they gossip? Would the community they had come to appreciate turn on them? Lily's fears seemed to reach a peak one Friday afternoon when the town held its annual harvest festival. It was a lively event, one that brought everyone out. Families, shop owners, and children running in every direction. There was music, dancing, and food. But it also served as a reminder of how tightly knit the community was, and Lily could feel the weight of the eyes around her as she moved through the crowd with Isla by her side. They had tried to stay inconspicuous, hoping the day would pass like any other, but there was a subtle shift in the air whenever they appeared together. Isla, as usual, was calm, walking with her usual grace, the same quiet smile on her lips. But Lily could feel the tension beneath her skin, the clench in her chest whenever she saw someone glance their way. They had been together long enough now that it was impossible for the townspeople not to notice the connection between them. Still, it was one thing to feel it, and quite another to acknowledge it out loud. As they strolled past the local bakery, Mrs. Thompson, a longtime resident, waved cheerfully at Isla and Lily. "Beautiful day, girls. The crowd's a bit much today, huh?" Mrs. Thompson's smile was wide, but Lily could see the hesitation in her eyes, a flicker of something that suggested more than just small-town politeness. Lily managed a weak smile and nodded, but inside, her heart was racing. Mrs. Thompson was one of those people who knew everyone's business, and if there was any doubt about how the town might react to their growing closeness, Mrs. Thompson would be the one to bring it into the light. As they continued walking, a group of teenagers passed by, whispering among themselves. Lily heard snatches of their conversation, just loud enough to catch the words. "Is that Isla with her?" The whisper was sharp, and though it wasn't directed at her, it felt like an accusation, like a moment of exposure in a world that wasn't ready for them. Lily felt the blood drain from her face. She wanted to say something, to confront them, but Isla's calm presence beside her was a steady anchor. She felt Isla's hand brush against hers, a silent reassurance that, for a moment, made everything feel right. But the moment passed too quickly. As they turned the corner to the town square, the full weight of the situation hit Lily. A couple of the older men who gathered around the fountain to chat every afternoon were eyeing them. One of them, Mr. Harris, who owned the local hardware store, gave them a quick once-over, his gaze lingering just a little too long. Lily could feel the weight of his judgment as if it was a physical force pressing down on her. She swallowed hard, hoping that somehow the town wouldn't turn against them. She hoped that this moment would just pass, that they could slip back into the comfortable anonymity of being part of a community that accepted them for who they were, even if that meant remaining on the periphery. But it wasn't meant to be. As they approached the center of the festival, where people were setting up booths for the local artisans, Lily felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned around to see none other than Sarah Mitchell, the town librarian, who had always been a welcoming presence in the bookstore, a woman who was usually warm and friendly, but this time there was a nervous energy about her that made Lily's stomach drop. "Sarah," Lily said, forcing a smile. "How's the festival?" "It's good, very good," Sarah replied, her voice a little too high-pitched. She glanced over at Isla before meeting Lily's eyes. I just wanted to talk to you for a moment." Lily's heart skipped a beat. Was this it? Was Sarah going to confront them about what was going on between her and Isla? Sarah seemed to hesitate for a moment, and then she took a deep breath. I just want you to know that we all see you, Lily. And Isla," she paused. "There's been talk. But," she added quickly, "I don't think anyone truly knows what to make of it. But I want you to know, you're not alone, and I don't think you should have to hide." Lily's mouth went dry as she processed Sarah's words. She had been expecting something different, something harsh, something accusatory, but instead, Sarah's tone was understanding. It wasn't condemnation. It wasn't judgment. The quiet ripple of voices around them seemed to calm for a moment as Sarah continued, I know small towns like ours aren't always kind to things they don't understand, but people have been talking, and maybe it's time to stop pretending they're not. Lily felt a weight lift off her shoulders, though it wasn't the kind of relief she expected. It was more like the quiet acceptance of a truth long left unsaid. She looked at Isla, who met her gaze with a quiet, steady strength. Thank you, Lily whispered to Sarah, the words escaping before she even had a chance to think them through. It wasn't just gratitude for Sarah's words, it was for the realization that perhaps the town wasn't as hostile as she had feared. There were people who understood, who didn't need to question her love for Isla, who didn't need to fit them into a box that made sense to everyone else. Sarah smiled softly. You don't have to hide, Lily. I know it's hard, but it's okay to be who you are. And maybe, just maybe, it's time for the rest of the town to accept that too. In that moment, something inside Lily shifted. It wasn't the end of her struggle, far from it, but it was the beginning of something different. The quiet acceptance from someone like Sarah meant more than words could express. It was a sign that perhaps the town was ready for a change. And as they walked away, hand in hand, Lily felt a flicker of hope, as fragile as it might be, spark deep within her. The weight of her internal battle hadn't completely vanished, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like she might be able to carry it. The town had begun to shift, slowly, imperceptibly, but it was a start.